Factors we're planning on monitoring are the behavior of these individual female terrapin when they approach the nest, when they approach the fence, and what their reaction to that fence is, where they nest, and how successful they are. This fence is going to be installed at the western end of the Jekyll Island Causeway. It's going to be between 12 and 16 inches off of the ground. It'll be monitored by personnel, Georgia Sea Turtle Center staff, myself, AmeriCorps members, and game cameras like these you can see here, which we've used in prior research to examine nesting success along nesting boxes here on Jekyll Island. Again, here's a picture of that Cedar Creek Causeway nest box with individuals entering the nest box. These are electrified with electric wire to stop predators and raccoons from entering these nesting boxes. To determine the optimal site for this nest, I analyzed 14 years of road survey data here on the Jekyll Island Causeway, where we've seen over 6,000 encounters since 2007. 1,121 of these encounters, approximately 20% of all of our encounters of diamondback terrapin on this causeway, occur in these bright red areas on this map, which indicates the most dense areas of road crossing. This is the far western end of the causeway, just by those two ponds and those iconic towers as you enter Jekyll Island. Future directions for this fencing is planned installation is actually beginning today. After this meeting, I'll be joining Cliff Garan and the landscaping crew on the causeway. We're going to be monitoring this extensively during the nesting season using game cameras and various personnel, and we hope this will contribute to the management of similar causeways throughout the region. In short, one thing that I want to hammer forth is that this short 1,000 feet of fencing is going to potentially impact roughly 20% of all animals we've ever encountered on the causeway, which in a very small area will have massive conservation implications and help boost the population here on Jekyll Island and serve as a model system to be adopted by causeways throughout the southeastern United States. One of the main benefits of this project, and one of the things that I think is most important, is the massive collaborative effort that we've undertaken so far. This has been a joint effort with 7 different departments here at the Jekyll Island Authority, including support from the Jekyll Island Foundation for funding, Animex International, and AmeriCorps. So I think it's a strong model for group work and collaborative conservation. With that, if there's time for questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? Thank you, David, for that report.
Thank you.
Hearing no questions, that concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. At this time, we'll open the floor for any comments from the public. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Hearing none, we'll move to the Finance Committee, and let it be noted that Chairman Wilkinson has arrived, and I am turning the chairmanship over to Chairman Wilkinson.
Thank you. So we're now going to Bill Gross and the Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be going over the February financials. The revenues for February were $2,367,782, which was $478,000 more than budgeted for the month. Year-to-date revenues reflect a favorable $4.3 million variance from budget and a favorable $6.1 million variance from prior year-to-date. The 2 areas with the largest variances from budget were parking revenues, which were $82,000 higher than budget for the month. Weather was beautiful, and it brought in a lot of people to enjoy the island. Lot rental revenues were $180,000 better than budget due to sales and resales at the moorings property. Golf revenues were $50,000 higher than budgeted, largely due to the nice weather. Marketing and event revenues were $47,000 higher due to the 75th Sorry event. Expenses for February were $2,028,889, which was $329,000 or 14% less than the budget for the month. Year-to-date expenses were $1.7 million less than budget and were $5.2 million more than prior year-to-date expenses. Largest variances for the month were human resources, which was $169,000 under budget due to the vacant positions, both full and part-time. Advertising and sales were $97,000 due to basically timing issues. It's anticipated these funds will be spent by the end of the fiscal year. Dues and subscriptions were were under budget by $38,000, which is a correction of an expense from January, which was a miscode. Net operating cash income for February was $338,893, which is $807,000 better than the budgeted net operating loss of $468,299. Year-to-date net operating cash income is $6 million better than the budget and $3.6 million better than prior year-to-date income. February traffic stats, total traffic count for February was 101,657 vehicles, which was about 18,400 more vehicles than February of 2021. Revenues from annual pass sales and online pass sales were 11,000 better than last year, and sales at the gate were 71,000 better than last year. Hotel stats. February of this year, revenues reported by the hotels were $3.9 million, which is $2.1 million more than February of 2021. This is a 109% increase in revenues. Occupancy rate was 59%, which is 14.6% higher than February of 2021. Revenue per available room was $104.11, which is up from $61.53 in February of 21. Average daily rate, $176.55, which is up from $138.67. Calendar year 2022. Year-to-date revenues reported by the hotels was $6.1 million, which is $2.6 million more than year-to-date 21 revenues. Occupancy rate was 46.8%, which is up from 39.9%. Revenue per available room was $77.05, which is up from $54.59 for year-to-date. Average daily rate was $164.71, which is up from $137. February was a strong month. Weather was beautiful. That's the financial report for February. At this time, I'd like to ask Marjorie Johnson to come and do a presentation or a request for EMS training equipment.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So our fire department would like to purchase a SIM mannequin. This mannequin would be used to help build proficiency in practical skills for our EMTs and paramedics. They would be able to, this one mannequin, you would be able to start IVs, do CPR, defibrillations, medication administration, and airway procedures. It's an advanced interactive system, and it creates real-life scenarios for them instead of just, using training. It would create real-life scenarios for them to monitor. It also captures the decisions and actions of the EMT and provides constructive feedback. And by purchasing an all-in-one mannequin, they'll be able to do all of these procedures on one mannequin instead of buying multiple training aids for that. And the cost of the equipment is $8,800, and it would be paid from the Fire Equipment Fund. Any questions?
Very good.
Marjorie, Dennis is here today, and perhaps it would be good for you to, or Dennis, to speak to the fact that we actually have the best training equipment around with our fire department and EMS. And for instance, the I don't know what it's called, Dennis, but the automatic heart.
Chest compressions.
Thank you.
Right.
If you could just update the board on this, I think it's impressive that we're one of the leading fire departments and EMS services around.
Yes, sir. Certainly with your all support, we have been doing very well with that. This particular device it actually works and interacts with what Mr. Hooks is referring to as, I think a couple years ago, maybe about two and a half years ago, we purchased the Zoll Auto Pulse, which it's a mechanical device that does the compressions during CPR. This was a very unique device and a very good device for us. A lot of reasons is we have a lot of places that have elevators, stairwells, things that restricted us from being able to do chest compressions in restricted areas. Not to mention, there's not quite as many people working over here as there are on the mainland, so we particularly can run into situations where we have minimal staff and available. So this device kind of takes the place of a person. It's mechanical, it runs off a battery, and it certainly is efficient. It runs nonstop, so it doesn't get tired. It doesn't have to, it can work in a small space. So normally if we were to go down a set of stairs, we'd have to stop CPR. And with this device that he's referring to, it will actually do the CPR while you're going down the stairs and in elevators and tight spaces. So moving over to what's at hand today is we had budgeted for these individual pieces like arms and legs and heads to do these training evolutions on to practice our skills. And this device that we ran across, actually a conference that was here held in this convention center, brought it all together. They offered one device that is also connected to a piece of software that monitors the treatments. It gives the scenarios in real time. It changes the heart rhythms. It actually, the patient presents however you like them to present. And we certainly want to, have realistic training for our folks to keep them top notch like they are. And we felt like this would be a very productive and service for many years to come. So all those individual pieces add up to nearly that amount, but having them all in one piece makes it more realistic. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you. Any questions? I'd be glad to talk about it.
Okay. Is there a motion to recommend authorizing the purchase of the all-in-one SIM mannequin for the purpose of EMS training as recommended by Marjorie staff?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. We will now open the floor for any public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Okay, I'm going to move, let's see, Dr. Evans, we have no report on human resources, I believe. Is there no report?
There's no report this month, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So next we move to the Marketing Committee. Joy Birch Meeks is the chair, and she will open the Marketing Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, Alexa is going to come, our Director of Marketing and Communications, and give us a quick media recap of some great news we've had lately, and then look forward to some upcoming events. Alexa?
Thank you, Joy. Oop, sorry, I hit the wrong one. Nope. Okay. So I hadn't given an update recently about some of our PR efforts. I know I've talked about this previously. Obviously, we invest a lot in growing our PR and media outreach. And recently, we had some wonderful highlights that I wanted to share with you all. I'm sure at this point, you've probably seen the Traveler's Choice Best of the Best designation that came out from TripAdvisor. And they do this every year. It's they look at destinations, beach locations, et cetera, around the U.S. and as well as around the world. But recently, we were listed as number 6 for their best beach locations. Of course, it's Driftwood Beach. It's always Driftwood Beach. But we were excited this year to see that in previous years, we've never really broken the top 10. So this year, we were number 6 on the list. And if you look at the list of locations, we are the only location aside from one other on the East Coast, and several of these are beach destinations in Hawaii. So I think that's certainly significant. And it's important to note that these designations are solely based on reviews from visitors who have come here. They leave those reviews on TripAdvisor. It's generated by the public, so those designations are not anything that we pay for. And I think it's also important to note that with Driftwood Beach on this list, I've talked about it previously, but I wanted to reiterate that aside from situations like what I'll talk about in a moment where you see Driftwood Beach featured, we do not do active marketing of Driftwood Beach any longer just because of the recognition that it has received. So it's really more passive recognition. You'll see it every now and then in media efforts through photographs. You'll see it on social media, but that is something that we look at, especially as we look at capacity management and trying to make sure that we're not overcrowding our beach destinations. So that's just something important that I wanted to note. And then I also wanted to share, we had recently, just as of this past week, a wonderful spread in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in their Sunday paper, 8 Beach Getaways. And Jekyll Island was actually featured as the first listing there. They did a wonderful mention of the new Marriott property here. And of course, what a time to come as you're planning for your vacation for the summer. So we were excited to have that. And then in addition to that, we also hosted a writer back in October. We worked with the state of Georgia. They brought a writer down to the coast and visited several destinations here. But one of them was a stopover on Jekyll, and we were able to host that writer and get him into a stay at the Jekyll Island Club Resort and have him visit the Sea Turtle Center, our museum, and really learn about the history here on Jekyll. And so that writer was with National Geographic, and they just released their April magazine, so that's the cover right there. And there's a wonderful spread about the Golden Isles and the coast of Georgia, and of course the hero image is our wonderful Driftwood Beach. Turtle Crawl. I know you guys are all excited. You're already registered. I wanted to bring this up because I know we talk a lot about the events that we have on the island. This is certainly one that we have been fortunate to continue on for several years. April 30th is this year's Turtle Crawl, but I did want to mention Turtle Crawl was actually the very first event that we had to cancel due to the pandemic. So it's exciting to see that this is returning to Jekyll Island. Last year we had to go fully virtual, so we are excited to welcome runners back to Jekyll for this event. So far in the last 3.5 weeks since we've gone live with registration, we have 471 participants registered and over 2,300 donations to date. Last year, we had a little over 900 participants total and around $4,000 in additional donations from those registrations. So we are pacing to, exceed those numbers. So I'm excited about that. And I did just want to mention that we offer all registration participants a commemorative T-shirt. We have a deadline for that. And the URL is JekyllIsland.com/turtlecrawl. So we're excited to be hosting that on April 30th. And we moved that timing back to April because we want this to sort of be a celebration, a celebratory event to kick off nesting season, which starts May 1st.
Alexa, just for clarity, the fact that the registration fees are in addition to these donations.
Yes, correct. Sorry if I confused anyone, but the registrations are part of the donation, but we also offer the option for people who, when they register, they can provide an additional donation. And so that is donations separate of registration. And then lastly, I wanted to give a quick update on the color purple, which is going to be filming on Jekyll Island. I think that there's been some conversation online already about it. I shared a couple pictures here that have been shared on social media about some sets that they're building. So I wanted to just quickly update you on where that stands. I know at the last board meeting I mentioned that the newspaper had announced a casting call. We had not formalized the contract at that point. We are actually finalizing a contract, and hopefully we'll have that finalized in the next day with them. And then they are slated to film on Jekyll the 20th of March through the 28th. And they will be filming off of a side road that is not general public access, so it shouldn't have too much impact, but they will also be filming at Driftwood Beach. And I wanted to give this update because I've talked about this as well, but it's important for you all to just be reminded when these productions come in terms of how we look at economic impact and how we evaluate when these productions are coming. Generally, we look at things like nesting season, wildlife impact, what's the economic impact in terms of will the cast and crew be able to fill up our hotels, or are they staying off island, things like that. And then just the general impact to the public. We certainly don't want to, and we look at this when we're looking at film productions, we don't want to have a big film production here for several weeks in the middle of the summer and have it reduce the experience for visitors who are coming here to vacation. So those are all things that we do look at. And, when we finalize the contract for this, I think that we'll be able to say that this had a nice economic impact with a low visitation impact. So we're excited to certainly have them here. They've been great to work with so far. And then we will be sending out public communication, kind of notifying the public of some road closures that'll take place, and other things for them to be aware of while the production's taking place. And if no one has any questions, that concludes my report.
Alexa, I actually have a question. It may be more for Jones. Jones, are we responsible for security when folks come to film?
Alexa, you want to respond to that?
So Joy, when this production comes and when most productions come, they are responsible for requesting their own security. And I do know that this film production already has GSP lined up to help manage the road closures, to help manage security and safety of the film set. We also require them to manage their own waste management or trash collection, bathrooms, all of those things. So majority of those services are provided by, the responsibility of the film production. Every now and then they will request some services of us. Of course, we charge a fee for that, but they typically will bring that stuff out from outside.
Thank you.
No problem.
Again, a great report. If there are no other questions, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you. We'll now open the floor for any public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. I don't see or hear. So move to the Legislative Committee with Trip Tollison.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Tollison is unable to be with us today, so I'll just provide a quick update. Most recently, we were in Atlanta with the Golden Isles Chamber for Golden Isles Chamber Day, but also during that time we were making various appointments and visits with legislative members of the Appropriations Committee on both the House and Senate side regarding the requested public safety complex funding. We also, during that visit, met with Commissioner Mark Williams, who's been very supportive of this particular request. As you know, it falls within the Department of Natural Resources from a budgetary department standpoint. And I'm very pleased to share with you today that as of last Friday, that the monies are contained in the FY22 amended budget. So now we're just waiting for the final sign-offs there. And we, of course, have special thanks to not only Mark, but also to Chairman Terry England and Chairman Blake Tillery, as well as the Chief of Appropriations Staff, Martha Wigton. She has been a super friend to the Jekyll Island Authority, and so I wanted to be sure and share that with you. Commissioner Williams, you're on the phone still, if you have any comments on this. Maybe he's not still on the phone.
John?
Yes, sir.
Did you say Mark?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I couldn't. It was sort of muffled. No, I guess we've just been moving through our budget process for FY23, and all that looks good from a department standpoint. But just glad it got included, and looking forward to getting everything signed, like you said.
Thank you, sir. So as a result of this being in the amended budget, Mr. Chairman, that's the impetus for why we have been coming to you in the past couple of months, looking at funds that were needed for the site clearing and for some tweaks in the design, because we realized that it will be imperative for us to move this project forward very quickly. So stay tuned. A lot more on this. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the report unless there are questions.
Questions? Okay. Going to go to open the floor for any public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Okay. But I am very, very grateful for the hard work by everyone in the legislature and here on staff. It's so much, it's very much needed. And that will close the legislative committee, I believe. And then we're going to go to committee of the whole. Is it Glenn Coyne next?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Glenn.
Mr. Chairman, today I'm delighted that we have Glenn Coyne with us. He is with the consulting group of GMC. He is a senior planner. As you know, we've been working with GMC now for several months on updates to the code of the Jekyll Island Authority. And we thought it would be well received today to have Glenn just give a general update since, as you know, we had a change in legal counsel during this process as Melissa moved to Charleston, and so we're running a little behind, but not too terribly behind, because Glenn and his team have been continuing to work on this project. So he's going to give you an update today. Glenn?
Thank you very much, Jones. Good morning, members of the board. Again, Glenn Coyne with GMC. And I will be brief. I'm going to go through very just top of the trees kind of look at what we've been working on. There's a lot of work in the background. I just wanted to remind you, last time I spoke with you in October, just to lay out what we are doing. And that is updating the codes that regulate development and what would typically be called zoning in another community, our development codes here on Jekyll Island. There's a lot of administrative procedures in there that we've adjusted and improved. I'll talk about that in a minute. We try to reflect new technology. There's things that have changed in the marketplace since the code was adopted the first time, so we wanted to make sure that we looked at that, but we also are trying to make sure we respect what keeps Jekyll unique and what makes it the history and the nature of Jekyll Island unique. We've reorganized the code into chapters so that things that are similar are grouped together so that you don't have to hunt and search throughout the entire document to find regulations, for example, that all relate to residential uses are all in one place now. Things that relate to business and commercial are all in one place now. And it's just a better organization. And this has all been through identifying the issues through the professional staff here with the authority, which have been really great to work with. We've had public input, which I'll highlight in a second, and then our staff's review of the code and what other best practices are out there in the marketplace. What we're not doing, importantly, is we're not changing anything about where you can develop on Jekyll. We're not adding new areas of development. We're not changing the map. We're simply just rewriting the codes that regulate that development on the island. So we're not changing anything as far as areas of development on Jekyll. Just a few key indicators I wanted to get in front of you so that you could see we have 2 public meetings. One happened in July and one is scheduled for April. Right now the tentative date is April 12th. We'll advertise that as appropriate when that gets finalized. We also did an online survey where folks went on the Jekyll Island website and responded to a series of questions and gave us some really good feedback about the different codes that we were looking at. I mentioned the staff here at Jekyll Island Authority, and we've had great workshop meetings with them. We have another one this afternoon to hopefully answer a few of the final remaining issues that we're working on. And then Jones mentioned Melissa. She and I had biweekly meetings scheduled where we checked in every other Monday afternoon and made sure that this project was tracking and that we were moving along, and that was very helpful. All said, so far we have over 240 pages of text, and as I mentioned, that's organized into 10 chapters that are by topic. So just to give you an idea, some examples of the things, I just wanted to show you the breadth of the types of things. This is not an exhaustive list, but just some of the highlights. Obviously here on Jekyll, as you've already heard today, the natural features, the environment, the resources that you have here that are special, we really felt like some of those ordinances that address those type of things and protect those things be updated. So you see a list here, adopted a coastal stormwater supplement. We did add a sea level rise ordinance so that in the future, as the level of the sea rises, if it should, there's something that we incorporated called a rolling buffer. So that way, there's always a buffer provided from that high level, the sea level. So if that changes over the future and that's monitored, it's built in that buffer would happen. We also incorporated a 3-foot freeboard for floodplain. That means your finished floor elevation of a new home or a new building needs to be at least 3 feet above that minimum flood elevation. That just gives people extra protection in the event of a flood event. So it was sort of being done, but we've documented it now. Firewise is a very important, very well established and well respected way to make sure that debris and trees and limbs and things and all those type of things that could be fire hazards are monitored and maintained, and we've adopted those, recommended that those standards be adopted. And then we took a very careful look at litter, something called a clean community ordinance, so that there's some good enforcement for folks who feel like they need to come here and litter. We'll make sure that that doesn't happen. We spent, I don't know how much time on the tree ordinance. It's a very major part of the codes. It's the longest single chapter, I think. Because it has plant lists, it has materials lists, it's very specific as to the types of trees and plants and material that we'd like to see maintained and replaced on Jekyll. So there's a lot of code language about how to maintain your trees, how to maintain your landscaping, where you can trim, where you can't trim, certain sizes of trees that are designated as important to protect. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of language that regulates trees. We've also, for the first time, established a Jekyll Island Authority Tree Mitigation Fund. That means that any kind of penalties that are assessed, that money will stay here on Jekyll and be used to mitigate any types of loss of trees. So that's very important. Residential neighborhoods is probably the next longest chapter and very important chapter. What we really want to do is try to maintain the character through the codes of the residential neighborhoods. And so we've incorporated a lot of administrative procedures, how you apply for a permit, what the process is to review that permit, who looks at it, who approves it, and then how it's inspected as the property is renovated or built. We've also looked at things like how you park vehicles on your property. Where do you put your boat? Where do you put your RV? How does storage happen, and what should it look like on these residential properties? So that was something that was mentioned in the code, but we've strengthened that. The design review standards is something that is really how we enforce maintaining the character of Jekyll Island, and we wanted to first and foremost protect the existing neighborhoods. So we're looking at things like building heights, limiting how any new homes or replacement homes or renovations of existing homes, how high they can go. We're trying to limit that from not being out of scale. Similarly, lot coverage, we don't want somebody to come in, lease a lot, and then just fill it up with the entire lot with homes and accessory buildings and parking. So we're trying to limit the area of the lot that you can disturb. And again, the ranch-style homes is our benchmark here to look at what's existing and how to protect that through the codes. And finally, in the residential area, we wanted to take a careful look at home occupations. This is something that's always been popular, but with the pandemic, it's even increased, more people working from home. And even though there's a lot of folks here that may be retired, there are what we call cottage industries that are happening. So we've identified which one of those uses are appropriate to happen in a residential unit. We don't want any change to the character of the house to happen because of it. We limit how many people can visit you per day, how the parking happens, things like that. We prohibit large trucks from either originating from or delivering to a house. So there's a lot of things in there that let you do an office or limited types of things, but not have a full-blown business running out of your house, and is the simplest way to describe that. Excuse me. Turning to the legitimate commercial areas, again, we had a lot of standards in something called the design guidelines that were sort of recommended that we pulled into the commercial codes. So again, as with the residential I mentioned, in the commercial area, it's much more strict. There are 8 specific steps you take if you want to do a commercial building, from everything from plan review down to final occupancy. So it's very detailed, engineering drawings, architectural drawings, how those are reviewed. It's a very detailed 8-step process. So we've codified that. It's there. It's for people to follow. The other thing that we've looked at and talked to Zach this morning already, and he's spending time in this, is the alcoholic beverage ordinance. And we want to make sure that what we do here on Jekyll is consistent with state law, but we also realize that there's some other special alcohol. There's special events. There's interest in having an outdoor carry in certain very limited areas. So we're looking at those types of things to implement alcoholic beverage regulations on Jekyll. The other part that we heard from through the staff and from the public and in our research was that there's a lot of folks that are coming onto Jekyll to conduct business that are not leaseholders on the island. So you see examples of it, people who come here to perform services like landscaping or cleaning swimming pools or similar, bicycle and kayak rentals, tourist charters, things like that. So they come onto the island, do what they do, and then leave. There's a real interest in simply getting a registration process for those folks, having them pay an annual fee, and have them give proof of insurance. That's really what it boils down to. Just to be on fair ground with the folks that have legitimate businesses here on the island in a physical location. So not everybody can have that here. You know, there is a need to come on the island, do the service, and then leave. But we want to make sure that the folks are protected who are using those services. So that's why we have the registration and the fees and the insurance. So that's what we call regulation of non-leaseholders on the island. Building codes is a very important area. We have a lot of building codes that are adopted already. There were a series of newer ones that Jekyll Island needed to adopt. Again, this is an international and a state set of codes that are updated regularly. And so what we've done is listed all of those that are applicable to Jekyll and said, as amended, they become the rule here on Jekyll as well. And we also established and clarified the relationship between Jekyll Island Authority and Glenn County on building inspections and how all that happens. That was sort of happening, but we again codified it. And then the other thing we did was added a new district. There's a series of residential districts that allow you to do certain density or certain types of housing by district. And it was proposed to add a new one called Planned Development District. So should new development come to Jekyll Island, or if there's a piece of property that is going to be developed, we're strongly advocating that go under this planned development category where the applicant provides a site plan, a narrative, a complete schedule. Everything is laid out ahead of time to show what that development's going to look like, and that could include a mix of uses or densities within that development, but we feel like it's very important that it coordinate with the surrounding area and it doesn't just sit out on its own, that it is something that, as it describes, is a planned development. So that's been recommended. One of the
Glenn,
sorry,
maybe
go
a
ahead.
comment right here, because as you've said, there's no advocacy here for additional development, and I think it's important for people to understand. The planned development community that Glenn was just referencing, actually, we utilize those type regulations whenever we were working with the Ocean Oaks project. So that's a good example of what happened with that project as far as landscaping and various issues there. Knowing that there is a project that is the one that is north of the Marriott, which we still have not gotten the concept on or anything like that, but knowing that that project has been, from the marketing study that we required, recommended not a hotel property, but instead a development, a housing type development, then this would become very important as we begin to go down that path. Is that not a true statement?
Yes, thanks for the clarification. Yep. Thank you. Another topic that arose in our research and discussions is the issue of folks going off of their particular leased piece of property to encroach into either a right-of-way or authority property or open space. And the idea is sometimes they trim a tree, or they'll extend their lawn a little bit, or they'll build a fence. And the idea is that little by little, these may not be a big deal, but as they accumulate, all of a sudden, it becomes a big problem. So we wanted to address this issue of encroachment off of leased property onto the either adjoining or different piece of property. So one other thing that we found out when we were looking at this is that sometimes people don't really know where the boundary is. They have a written lease, and sometimes there's a drawing that goes along with that, but we are advocating that it might be time to require a property survey. And as you can see on the slide, it would only happen during certain triggers. If you apply for, if the property is transferred, you know, if you buy a piece of property in another community, typically there's a property survey. If you amend your lease, if you apply for a building permit or a tree permit, and then if you get one of those certifications for your flood level, we're advocating that eventually the island should be covered by these property surveys. It just helps everyone know where their boundaries are, where the street right-of-way, for lack of a better word, is, and it just will help down the road when there's property disputes. And so the language that we've used is that property survey should be somewhere between 2 or 5 years old, no older than that. So it doesn't mean you have to do it every single time, but if you have a survey that's within 2 or 5 years, and we haven't decided that number yet, we will for the final code, then you're good to go. But the idea is just to begin to establish where the property lines are throughout the island. Then what we can do is turn that into a electronic map. We can use technology to then track that and make sure that we're keeping track of where the properties are and where these encroachments happen. What we did with the leased property is also then put in some penalties, although we were very careful to have it be a scaled enforcement leading to penalties. So there's ways that people can mitigate it without getting into a whole lot of trouble if they voluntarily correct whatever the encroachment is. So we've established all of that in a new chapter that we're called leased property. And that's unique, very unique to Jekyll Island, and we think that that's going to be a real help for folks down the road. Finally, historic preservation. There's a lot of historic preservation that already happens on the island. You have a committee of your board dedicated to it. I don't need to really go into much with that, but what we wanted to do is 2 things. One, formally recognize the official historic districts that exist, and then begin to lay out what would happen if there are future historic districts down the road. It may be hard to believe, but some of the neighborhoods here on Jekyll Island are fast approaching 50 years old, and that's the benchmark and threshold for something to be potentially considered historic. So as some of these mid-century neighborhoods become 50 years old, we thought it was very important to establish the procedure that if, and a big if, there's some designation down the road, there's a procedure and a public process for how that would happen. And so that's what this section of the code addresses. Not advocating that that happens, but if it does, establish the way that it would go about. So how do we get to the finish line? Jones mentioned we've been working since July of last year. I talked earlier about the public meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for April 12th. And then what we are hoping to do is get the codes ready for your first reading at your meeting in May, and the second and final reading at your meeting in June, so that we can get the codes onto the books. And again, for those that are interested, we are posting updates at the Jekyll Island website under a special section that deals with the code revision. And I just wanted to close by saying, again, as I always do, thanks to the staff. They've been wonderful in reviewing our drafts and giving us really good comments. I want to thank Zach in advance for him jumping into this and reviewing the codes from the legal standpoint. And then to just let you know that when we're finished, you're never really finished with the codes. There will be something that will come up next year. There'll be something that will come up 2 years. And it's a living document that you need to keep taking a look at and updating as needed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. And as I understand, Counselor, there's no actions required at this point. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All righty. Thank you all very, very much. Next, I'm showing the
Mr.
amendment.
Chairman, it may be board members may have a question of Glenn
Okay.
before he goes away. Any board member? No.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The next I'm showing is the amendment to Maxwell's General Store lease assignment. Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would call on our leasing manager, Maria Humphrey, to come give the presentation on this amendment and assignment.
Good morning. This morning for your consideration, we have an assignment and amendment to one of our Beach Village leases. Last year, sadly, we lost one of our shop owners. His shop was given to his daughter in his will. He leased it under his own name, not under a business name, so it had to go through probate. His daughter is accepting ownership of the store, provided you are okay with the assignment. There were a couple small clerical errors when the original lease was done in the square footage. It was off by 3 square feet, and the suite number originally listed was incorrect. So this amendment will correct those inconsistencies and be considered an amendment and assignment if you agree to allow that to happen.
Counselor, we're going to need a motion on that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
And just to note, staff is recommending approval of this amendment and assignment.
Okay, so what I need is a motion to recommend approving the assignment and amendment of the Maxwell's General Store lease as recommended by staff. I need a motion.
So moved.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Mr. Chairman? That concludes our item.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Jones, do I go to you on the 2022 SPLOST list?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, draft page 17, you have a copy of a memorandum from me, and it outlines recommended SPLOST projects for consideration by Glenn County for the 2022 SPLOST. As you may recall, we have participated in previous SPLOST programs by the county, and we developed the list based on the capital program that you review and update yearly. That capital program is included in our strategic plan that is presented to the state, and then we look at projects that are on that listing that have relationship to the greater residency of Glenn County as far as presenting to you projects for consideration for SPLOS. The projects that are listed here are the fishing pier renovations, which have been proposed in the past couple of SPLOS efforts. You see there, it's estimated at $1.2 million. Bike path completion to the Guest Information Center, that's $502,255. You realize that was a project of the federal T program, which is no longer, and you've heard me talk about that we, in accordance with their guidelines, that when the project was to be constructed, most of the monies had been spent with the design work, and so that's the reason it is an unfinished project. Bike paths have been a priority under past SPLOS programs of the county, and so while we've been moving forward on our other bike paths, we think this one would be a good connector, because we are working with DOT on the project of moving or of completing the bike path all the way from the Welcome Center to 17, and then once it's at 17, it becomes a part of the greater Coastal Greenway path, which connects with the city of Brunswick and St. Simons, and so the greater of Glenn County. So this project seems very appropriate from that standpoint. The third one is one that we usually have not put forward. Usually we've put forward the actual project and not the design and permitting. But in this case, as you'll recall from the last board meeting, we talked about the bike path at the north end, that once we complete the bike path construction that we're about to be beginning, and Noel will talk about that a little bit later on today's agenda, then the only remaining bike path on the island to be completed is the north loop that would go from Driftwood Beach to the fishing pier. So obviously, if the fishing pier is improved, it just makes sense that we begin to move in this direction. We know there's a lot of support for this path from guests and residents alike, and yet we also know that this particular path will require not only DNR permits, but it will also require Corps of Engineer permits. So it will be very involved. And we also know that the design of this path, because of the inundation from the last two hurricanes, it will be beyond our capabilities on staff. We will have to have a design firm to do this path. So we are proposing $245,000 for the design and permitting of that path. I will say to you, however, in a preliminary discussion with our county commissioner from our district, he did present to me that it could be a possibility that they would rather look at the construction dollars and then have the authority to as our match to be responsible for the design and permitting, which of course would be something that I would think that you would agree to, that because if the construction's over $1 million, then that would be a good project for us to partner with in that way, obviously. Yet to be determined, obviously, all of these projects, but yet this is the preliminary recommended list. The fourth one would be sanitary sewer line repairs, and that's $1.156 million. So the total that we're presenting to you is $3,104,255.10 as presented. If in fact the design were to be our share and were to be replaced with $1 million for construction, then the total package would be $3.859 million. And since this is more of a recommended list, I feel like that it's appropriate that we could, Mr. Chairman, that with your, if it's your pleasure, that we could recommend the list and then give the flexibility of working with the county on either the actual project or construction or the design and engineering. There are 2 additional pages in the memo that is in your packet today, which highlight the contributions of Jekyll Island toward Glenn County. And you will remember that the Seelig Center at the University of Georgia in 2018 did a study of the impacts of Jekyll Island on Glenn County and the greater coastal area. And that particular study found that 22% of the gross sales within Glenn County could be attributed to Jekyll, and 28.5% of all jobs within the county. And we will be proposing in the new budget year for an update of this study from the Seelig Center because obviously there have been additional hotels to open on Jekyll since this time, and also with the differences that the pandemic has now presented, we think it would be wise to update that study. But even based on the 2018 numbers, we feel like those numbers are significant. We also know that in FY 2021, $904,323 was levied on property taxes from Jekyll Island to Glenn County. And additionally, the state of Georgia does not break out sales taxes from sources as they do in some other states. And so the state, and every time Marjorie tries to get any kind of additional information on this, the state basically gives you a lump sum for the county. And obviously that's problematic for us, being a subset within the county and not an incorporated city or county, to try and get a handle on our impacts as far as our sales tax. And so what we've done is we have retained KB Advisory Group out of Atlanta. They do municipal, a lot of municipal economic impact and assessments, and to review our business community here on Jekyll, and to extrapolate from various sources the estimates of business impact from Jekyll's sales tax to Glenn County. It is, in many cases, it's fairly easily done as far as looking at if you have a big box store, for instance, across the country, there's pretty much some standards as far as per square foot how much those stores generate. And so anyway, looking at some of those kind of formula to be able to come forward with numbers. And this is something that was not an expensive study, and Marjorie, do you remember the cost on that one? Oh yeah, $8,700. It's just a quick analysis. And so we went ahead and just through funds that that you had already appropriated for miscellaneous studies this year, we already are having this done because obviously we'd like to be able to present that data to to Glenn County to boost our arguments for any SPLOST list that you approve. So, Mr. Chairman, I've talked beyond just the list today, but to give you some additional information about what we're trying to do to make certain that the data is as absolutely dependable as it can be. But it is our recommendation that the board at least endorse the listing as presented, with the understanding that if revisions are made, then we certainly come back for a final, but that we would entertain appropriate revisions. For instance, if we were to match the A&E work on the bike path with a proposal from Glenn County that may be a construction proposal.
Council, would I then go to a motion to approve the proposed 2022 SPLOST for submittal to the Glenn County Board of Commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be appropriate at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the proposed 2022 SPLOST list for submittal to the Glenn County Board of Commissioners as recommended by staff?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. And we have a motion to recommend approval of the proposed 2022 SPLOST list for submittal to the Glenn County Board of Commissioners as recommended by staff. Any discussion? Chair hears no request for discussion. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I'm next going to move to the award recommendation for RFP 368, market analysis for Jekyll Island Amphitheater. Jones?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Members received a late notice on this particular RFP because we were frankly running up against the wire on making the final selection. Not because the proposals weren't good, but because they were very close. We did receive, let me give you a little background here, Mr. Chairman. You will recall that back in last summer, we issued an RFP for the amphitheater. When that particular RFP was issued, it did not have a deadline on it, and we received no responses. We were just trying to gauge the interests of potential development folks or promoters on working with us on the amphitheater. We then revised that particular RFP to have a deadline. And when that deadline came, we had received only one proposal, and it was not responsive. And so we then went back to the drawing board and decided that maybe we were looking at the wrong information rather than just going straight for a partner on this, that maybe we needed some additional data and additional analysis. So we began to look at the idea of a market analysis to determine the feasibility. And you actually then approved RFP 368 for a market analysis for the Jekyll Island Amphitheater, and it was issued on January the 19th with a submission deadline of March the 1st. The idea there was that times have changed, and maybe the amphitheater wouldn't be used exactly as it had been in the past. And there are also now new competitions as far as entertainment and new entertainments that we never realized in the past. And so consequently, we submitted this RFP, and I'm very pleased to let you know we ended up with 7 proposals. And all of those proposed, all of the submittals had backgrounds in working with amphitheaters as far as the construction, the analysis as far as feasibility, and then the idea of working with production companies and that sort of thing. So one of the ideas is from this particular RFP that I think our entire review team was convinced of was that the feasibility analysis basically will let us know what the right use is and what the right size is and how a design of that amphitheater will either be appropriate for Jekyll or it won't be. So, as I indicated, we received 7 proposals. We shortlisted 3, and then we had interviews that began last Thursday, as was called for in the RFP. We interviewed 3 firms, DLR Group, Johnson Consulting, and Houghton. Johnson Consulting and Houghton were both by Zoom calls, and DL Group actually was in person, and which was kind of unique in that we haven't had an in-person response to an RFP now in about 2 years as a result of the pandemic. But then yesterday, after all the interviews were concluded, the review group went through everything that had been submitted, and we are unanimous in our recommendation to you for the DL Group. The DL Group is out of Cleveland, Ohio, and we're very impressed with their proposal, and we're excited about them moving forward. They also broke their proposal down in an interesting way in that they will do a market and site assessment. And if at the end of that market and site assessment, their recommendation is this is not going to work, then that's the end of the contract. And that portion of the contract is $29,400. But if in fact their market and site assessment comes forward with a plan that is appropriate and that should be pursued, then we'll have that opportunity to say, go forward. And the total then of the entire project would be $68,900, which would include the first phase. If in fact the entire project is done, there will be pro forma, financial pro forma as part of the operating plan, as well as initial design work. And so we're excited about the opportunity to finally take this project to the next step. So our recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is that contingent upon actual final contract review and negotiation and legal review, that we enter into a contract with DLR Group to conduct the market assessment.
That is DLR?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Counselor, I guess I need a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that would be appropriate.
Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend awarding RFP 368 to DLR Group pending a contract completion and legal review? Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Jones, quick
Yes.
question. Is most of the parking, would the parking be in the rear of the administration or collectively?
Well, parking would be one of the issues that would, if you get into the second phase, that they would look at. Because obviously on Jekyll Island, well, maybe not so obviously, but we would not, we would want to limit just a massive number of cars parking for a performance. Instead, there may be options such as shuttle services and things like that.
Any other questions? Okay, so we're looking at a motion to recommend awarding RFP 368 to DLR Group pending contract completion and legal review. I have been moved and seconded. Any discussion, further discussion? Let's vote. All in favor of this motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, I was going to go to Noel, and no actions required, but an operations update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give a quick project update. As Jones likes to mention from time to time, it's never a dull moment working for the authority. We always have something going on. We always have something in queue. We always have something in the future we're shooting towards. So this is just kind of a quick and dirty overview of some things that are taking place right now. And on the left, you see a listing of projects that are either currently underway or in the process of getting underway. The crossovers are substantially complete with the exception of some repairs that we're going through. And if you remember that state bond money that was associated with the revetment. And we have a good accounting of how much money we have left. So we're kind of going back through crossovers and fine tuning the crossovers and doing some repairs that we've had from some storm damage. The convention center furniture is partially complete. You saw it when you came in. There's new furniture spread around. We're waiting on some tables to come in to accent those place settings around the convention center. 5 Hayes was a property that we demolished, a residential property we demolished, and we received a successful bid for that property, and they've since put a house on that property and are nearing completion. The moorings has just recently started on Building A, which is the last building, and it's a large building similar in nature to Building B, which was the first large building that they built, and that'll complete the moorings. Public Works offices, which you've funded in the past, campground expansion, which I updated you on last board meeting, the public safety complex, of which you're keenly aware of which Mr. Hooks mentioned was hopefully 100% funded by the legislature. The airport terminal building, which I'll be in front of you next month with our Pond Group, who is our airport engineer, and GDOT to recommend a responsive low bidder to the design build contract. Airport hangars, which will be a public-private partnership, which you've committed some site work money to in a past budget that we're looking to see go underway. The Georgia Sea Turtle Center expansion, which is an exciting project that we are in the infancy of trying to get some schematics that we would turn over to the foundation to look into fundraising for. Causeway Billboard, which is a project that we've had on the books since pre-pandemic, and every time we've received funding and went to contract, that steel prices or something else has been negatively affected, so we never had enough money to get to the altar with that project, but hopefully we'll have resolution of that soon. And probably the most important project on this list, lightning rod wise, has been the Water Tower 4 rehabilitation, which has been slow going due to subcontracting and issues with COVID-19. But more importantly, that picture on the right, which is a temporary cell tower, and that is Verizon's temporary cell tower. If you recall, I mentioned that they had originally not raised it to its full elevation. They raised it to 95 feet. It should have been at 123 feet, which doesn't sound like a lot of distance, but it's enough distance to take it to where it's not shooting in the trees anymore. It's shooting a signal above the treetops. Well, yesterday, that is a picture that was sent to me by our wastewater superintendent, Alan Thurston, and that's a man basket with a crane, and I've been told that they have raised that tower to the maximum allowed elevation by the FAA. So hopefully if you're at the Marriott and on the south end, you should be getting a decent signal from Verizon, and that'll clear a lot of comments and inquiries that we receive from the hotels and guests and just in general.
So Noel, that tower was at 95 when they first installed it, and then it went to 115, and now it's taller, or is it?
Yes, sir. They initially raised it to 115, but the winds were too strong to get up the rest of the way, and they needed a man basket, so they abandoned trying to get it the rest of the way up. And then yesterday, they finally came back out with the man basket to raise it the rest of the way. And I do want to reiterate some comments that we've had internally, and just to remind the general public and the board that those cell towers, those temporary cell towers, are not of our doing. That is Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever it is manipulating their cell tower. They lease the water tower space to put their antennas on, and in their contract, if we decide to rehabilitate the water tower, it's their duty to temporarily provide service on their contract or subcontractor's temporary tower. So that is their solution. And this was some interesting lessons learned from our standpoint, because when we leave this tower, we're heading south and we're going to do Water Tower 5. And Water Tower 5 has quite a bit of antenna on it that shoots cell signals over St. Simon's Island. So I'm sure that would be a great impact if one of the carriers was supposed to repeat what happened at the Jekyll Island Tower. We would have the Pier Village and that whole area around Neptune Park would not be receiving certain cell service because they're shooting off of our tower on the south end, which a lot of people don't realize. So we're going to try to get out ahead of that subject and make sure everybody's at the height that they're supposed to be.
Hey, Noel, one more question
Yes, sir.
for the board related to that. What's the latest as far as that water tower rehabilitation? What are you hearing from
We had a kickoff meeting with Suez at the beginning of March, and they're committing to us that by the second week of August that they will be 100% complete and demobilizing from the area. And we expressed upon them that hurricane season, and they're well aware. But I just wanted to get that on the record with them during the kickoff meeting, that you're really pushing the outer limits of what you should be handling a water tower in hurricane season. So, especially one sitting right on the coast. And the last thing I wanted to cover was just to show two pieces of equipment that we just received in the past couple of weeks. On the left is our brand new backhoe, which replaced the one that we've had since 1994 that was ceremoniously taken out of service, or not so ceremoniously, depending on how you look at it. And on the right-hand side is the vacuum truck, which is a first for Jekyll Island. And that vacuum truck resides at Water Wastewater. And that's an important piece of equipment that we've never really had. We've had a little trailer-mounted sewer jet that we can go clear blockages with. But this piece of equipment, it's over $300,000, and we were able to use a state contract to do a lease purchase. So we'll lease it for 7 years, and then we'll buy it for $1, which is a pretty good deal. And the service life on that is up to 20 years, so we'll definitely get our use out of it. But typically in the past, when we've reached blockages that we can't cure with our little trailer-mounted jet, which doesn't really have a lot of power, we'd have to call Joint Water Sewer, and they charge us by the hour to come over here and handle that. And it also gives us the flexibility to look at other things, such as stormwater drains that the authority maintains, and water line breaks and things of that nature. So that piece of equipment, Water and Wastewater is getting trained on, and we're excited to have that, and we're appreciative of the board's listening to needs that we have as far as equipment goes, and trying to help the public works departments get better with equipment and work a little bit smarter and not harder. So I certainly appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. John?
Yes, sir. Just 3 quick items under my report. RFP 369, Georgia Sea Turtle Center Affiliate Scientist Update. You approved this RFP, And then after consultation with representatives of the Turtle Center and Conservation Department and Legal Department, we have put this on hold until we have a little more, a little better direction from Conservation and the Turtle Center as far as exactly how this affiliate position will work. So a little more clarity Zach felt like was needed, and so I am very much in agreement that we just wait on issuing that. So just an update for you there. Also, golf improvement strategy. You know that we had an archaeological study update done, consulting group, Terracon. They've been working on their revised report to send to the State Historic Preservation Office in response to SHPO's comments and requests for additional information from SHPO. And we have not received that report yet. And so we're waiting on them to get it finalized and back to SHPO. So nothing new to report there. I do anticipate that at next month's meeting, we'll have an update from the National Golf Foundation Consulting Group on the review they've been doing to update the study that they did now about 6 years ago, looking at our golf courses. And so I think that'll be a very interesting presentation that they'll make next month. They also will, their report that they're working on, their update, will look at the impacts of the pandemic on golf, not only throughout the country, but also specifically on Jekyll Island. So stay tuned for that. The one other thing besides the sheets that are in your file, in your blue folder that I've already mentioned, such as the public comments, there is an interesting piece of data in your packet today, draft page 10. It's the Convention Center updates. And I wanted to call your attention to the fact that if you look at event days, that we're beginning to be back in equal to 2019, FY 2019, which was a very good year. Of course, then 20 was skewed because the first half of 20 was full throttle, and then it was a total pullback. So 20 is a very difficult year to follow. But looking at 19, and then you look at FY 22, and you look at attendance numbers, while they're still down, the event days are approaching 19, and revenues look good, and square feet utilized too. So we're making good progress at having groups back, but obviously still not where we were earlier, but certainly something to be aware of. And no doubt the numbers will be smaller, because if you spread everybody out like this with the audience chairs today, the numbers are always going to be smaller. But, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report, unless there are questions.
Any questions? Thank you. My comments, as you all know, the chair, this and many other commissions, is term limited, and so I'm waiting to hear what I will probably rotate off, or at least I won't be chair, and so forth. But I just want to remind each and every one of you, when I went to see Governor Deal, I was debating about retiring, and when I asked, I said, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I really do want to be in this authority. I love the foundation and so forth, and so I can't thank you all enough. And as I said, I can never say it enough. This staff is just beyond remarkable, and George is so lucky to have I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. We would ask that you identify yourself so we know who we're hearing from.
Good morning. My name is Al Tate. I'm a permanent resident on Jekyll Island. I rise to comment on the ordinance revision update. From what we saw presented this morning, this update is going to be very extensive. It's going to be impacting everything, including the Jekyll Island Authority, the residents, visitors, and everybody to a pretty significant degree. So then I look and see that they're wanting to have the first public meeting in just a little over a month, or is it even less than a month? And that is going to be a significant problem in the making, I'm afraid, because all the organizations on Jekyll Island and the things you don't think about sometimes, for example, the churches, the art associations, some of the clubs that participate, are all going to be impacted by this, and often that will be in ways unforeseen by the group that's working on these ordinances. We need to have good, clear communication between these people that have a stake, all our stakeholders, and this ordinance preparation, which means that there needs to be an adequate time for them to have input into this process. 1 month, since many of these organizations meet on a monthly basis, means that they will not have an opportunity to get together with their group and interact about what's going on with these. So I would suggest that the authority and the folks working with this, the GMC folks, make an extra effort to communicate with our Jekyll Island Citizens Association and stakeholder groups to urge them to take a close look at these, to prepare this draft so that we can have a draft at least 1 month ahead of any public meeting instead of trying to just rush this through. If you don't, I think there's going to be real trouble with what these ordinances do when they actually go into effect. So I would urge you to have consideration of writing letters, perhaps communicating and offering feedback opportunity to these organizations especially. So that's my concern. The other thing I think that you need to think about is that when these ordinances go into effect, there's going to be a necessity for considerably more administrative hours, enforcement, additional enforcement activity, and that's either going to mean more staff or a lot more workload for staff that you have. My comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Anybody else? Do we need a break?
Oh, you got somebody.
Oh, coming up. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jim Klippel, 5 Clark Street. Thank you for everything. Just a couple comments. Thank you so much for the Terrapin project. One suggestion is during Terrapin season, maybe we reduce the speed limit on the causeway from 55 to 45 at certain times. Also, regarding the marketing for our treasured north end feature, which is the Driftwood Beach, there's a very fine area in South Carolina called Botany Bay, has a similar type of feature. And they have a natural science staff that stays there to communicate with people about the assets there. They also have strict regulations about cutting the driftwood and also taking shells. So people have adopted finding whelk shells and so forth and just decorating the trees with it. And it's quite spectacular. Since we have such a great feature here on the island, one thought would be to maximize the protection of it and also in a more passive marketing, make it aware that it's a very treasured asset to our community. Also, since we're highlighting the movie production on the island right now, Jekyll has a very rich movie production history, And I think that there's a possibility that there could be some type of tour or emphasis on producing some type of literature or something that showed areas of significance where films were made, such as Bagger Vance and the X-Men, and then this movie too. And also take advantage of potential income from post-production, where maybe these houses could be open to the public for pictures or just communication and marketing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As the author of the Freshwater Turtle Protection Act, I really appreciate that mention on the terrapins. I'm going to open the March 15th, 2022 board meeting of the Jekyll Island Authority. We will now call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.
Here.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Here.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Here.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Here.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks.
Here.
Dr. Buster Evans.
Here.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Here.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Here.
Mr. Tripp Tollison is absent today. Sir, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The action items. The minutes of the February 15th, 2022 board meeting. I need a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the February 15, 2022 board meeting. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Chair, there's none. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of the February 15, 2022 board meeting will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. We have a request for EMS training equipment. I can tell you some stories from the Navy of this equipment, and thank goodness. I'm so glad someone requested this. Board members have received a Finance Committee recommendation to authorize the purchase of an all-in-one sim mannequin for the purpose of EMS training. Is there any further discussion before a vote to accept this recommendation? No second is needed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, we're going back to the amendment to Maxwell's General Store lease assignment. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to approve the assignment and amendment of the Maxwell's General Store lease. Is there any further discussion before a vote to accept the recommendation? I don't need a motion or a second. No? Okay. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? I don't think I heard. Do I need a roll call?
No,
No.
sir.
Okay. All right. So the motion carries. The proposed 2022 SPLOST list, board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to approve the proposed 2022 SPLOST submittal. The SPLOST list for submittal to the Glenn County Board of Commissioners. Any further discussion before a vote to accept the recommendation? No motion or second is needed. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. The award recommendation for RFP 368, market analysis for Jekyll Island Amphitheater. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to award RFP 368 to DLR Group, pending contract completion and legal review. Is there any further discussion before a vote to accept the recommendation? Chair hears none. No motion or second is needed. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign, the motion carries. And now we get to Mr. Kruger's favorite part. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, please.
Good morning. My name is David Youngblood. I didn't realize, I tried to get on the permission to come up and talk to you guys good, and I did not realize, I thought I was on the agenda. I would like to talk to the board about renewing the lease on my property. I currently own 912 North Beachview Drive. The property's been in our house, in our name since 1968. My mother was the owner of the house until recently she passed. During the renewal of the leases, I feel that she was beginning to maybe have a little bit of dementia. I don't know why she didn't renew the lease. Currently, I would like to sell the house to my daughter. Unfortunately, there's only 27 years left on this lease. She needs, because of the cost and all that, we would like to see if she could get a 30-year mortgage, but she can't because of the time constraints on the lease. So the options that we've been given would be to renew the lease is at 5% of the current assessed land value by the county. This translates into roughly $7,600 a year versus the lease that we're currently paying, which is around $400, a little bit more. I understand that the leases were redone 12 years ago, and I would like to see if there's any way that we could go back to, try to get into that type of lease. I think paying over 1,300% higher taxes than a typical homeowner pays on Jekyll, it's a financial hardship. It would be for my daughter and for me. Or we could just, continue the lease at 27 years, but we're also going to come into this in 27 years. I would just like for the board to maybe reconsider and see if there's an option that we can pursue. Like I said, we've been on the island since 1968, and this would be the third generation going into this house. And, we love this island. We've been here a long time and want to remain here. And love to see all the stuff that's going on. And if you would just take that into consideration and give me some advisement, I would appreciate it.
I well remember when all this took place, and I was still in the house, and man alive, that was something. I don't know that we can, Counselor, can we?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Youngblood has given you a public comment. Your policies don't, except in cases of emergency or compelling extenuating circumstances, you're generally are not permitted to take up action requested during a public comment. That's one of your policies that was adopted by the board. The board can certainly consider it at a different time, but for purposes of today's meeting, the effect is a member of the public has given you a public comment. You've heard it. And that's kind of the end of the matter for purposes of today's meeting.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll move to adjourn.
I can't imagine. What is the time?
11:16.
11:16 daylight savings time. And so this,
We need a second.
yeah,
Second.
been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Like sign? Okay, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let me remind board members that there is a work session is scheduled in room 1-2, beginning in 15 minutes. And it is work session for the board. Obviously, it's in the public. So you've got about 15 minutes, and then we'll see you there. For those on the phone, there is a phone opportunity, right, Anna?
Yes, you can hang up and then call in the same number in about 15 minutes.
It's old age, man.